Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Ascending with Ashley podcast. And we have our dear friend Dani with us again. Welcome back, girlfriend.
Oh, hi to all my spooky friends. I'm so
I
excited for this episode.
know. We've got a spooky episode. I don't know about you, but all of my feeds have just been filled with like spookiness and gore, and I've been very much so loving it this season.
Oh, I'm loving it. So the timing of recording this is perfect because we've actually had some borderline unseasonable sunshine until today. And I'm
Yeah.
recording this on like the rainiest, dreariest day. That's why it's so dark in here. It's the middle of the morning right now, but it's so, so dark and like creepy in here. It's
Mhm.
perfect.
Oh my God, I didn't put that together till just now. You're right, though. It's dreary and rainy and gloomy here too, which really sets the mood for today. So,
Mhm.
so friends, if you listened to our last episode, which by the way, got all the feedback on the Heath Ledger episode, thank you so much. We love feedback, so please keep it coming. If there's anybody that you want us to do, let us know. Um, Today's episode is an interesting one. This episode it's an exploration. It's kind of like an open dialogue conversation on astrology and nature versus nurture and serial killers. And so we're talking about three of the most infamous ones that have been in pop culture over the last couple years. We'll be touching on Ed Gein, we'll be touching on Jeffrey Dahmer, and we will be touching on John Wayne Gacy. If you are unfamiliar with any of these three guys, have you been living under a rock? They have just been everywhere with the Monsters series on Netflix, and they've just been everywhere. I think as a disclaimer, I want to say that we are in no way glamorizing anything that they have done. We are in, of course, my doorbell's ringing. They can wait. It's probably a package. Nod to Danny and mine's conversation before we started. Um, anyways, um, we're in no way glamorizing what these men have done. We are in no way using astrology to blame their actions. As I said before, this is an open dialogue conversation, and we'll be looking at their charts. And I want to really explore this idea of nature versus nurture. So for the listeners are like, what are you talking about? This is a concept that you find a lot in biological spaces, biology type spaces. This idea of which one of those topics has more of an effect on a person, on a person's psyche, on a person's actions, on a person's choices. Nature, their genetics, how they're built, versus nurture, how they're raised, the people around them, the social groups that they have when they're younger. And it's a conversation that has been had forever, but I'm not sure if it's been had in the astrological space. If it has, it's news to me. And so today I kind of want to talk about that. And if you guys like this episode, we can definitely give you more of this. So, yeah, where should we kick this off, Dani?
One thing that I wanted to say at the top of the episode is astrology itself is kind of a manifestation of the nature versus nurture conversation in the first place.
Yeah.
When you look at astrology, you're naturally having this back and forth between here's what's presented in the chart,
Hmm.
but then you also have to factor in how each of us chooses to embody and express our chart. So there are these soul contracts, these predestined points and events and interactions. But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, we are embodying and expressing our chart. And that's definitely the stance that I take, especially when talking about deplorable human beings like the three we're going to be talking about today.
Hmm.
Because where you can get dicey with astrology, like you just wonderfully said, Ash, is it's really easy to come off like you're explaining away
Right.
when a good astrologer is using astrology as like content. or
Yeah.
context and like reference to what they're seeing, just like we use each of these, not just these three serial killers but anyone, we take their childhood into consideration, we
Right.
take how they were raised into consideration, the environment they were raised in. That's all part of the nurture part of the conversation, and nature is the hand that you're dealt and what you're born with. Personally, just to throw it out there, I am a person who just straight up believes in both. Both are extremely valid as the other one, and they both create this unique combination that later results in how a human being ends up. But you're right that there's been this long standing debate of which one kind of trumps over the other one. And in all of my time, I've never been able to find hard evidence for one over the other. They both like create this unique combination for how a person later on can end up, and the choices they make and behaviors they have based on those factors, who they are and where they came from.
I totally agree. I totally agree. So I think what we're gonna do, fam, especially if you're watching on YouTube, we are just gonna pull up a chart and kind of pick out what we see, kind of like our previous episodes, but a little different. I think I know for me, which is great with having two astrologers in here, right? What sticks out to me might not stick out to Dani and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely really want to look at what's happening in their fourth house. And I definitely want to talk about the IC line, which a lot of astrologers don't talk about. So if you're like, what the hell is that? This is going to be a great conversation for you to understand how important the IC is in astrology. Dani and I have really stayed away from that conversation because I would say it's more advanced astrology. And so, if you don't understand the sun, moon, and rising, there's no point to talk to you about an IC line, right? If you don't understand the MC, why are we talking about the IC?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the IC line is going to be really important for this conversation in particular.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. So let's actually give a rundown of the IC right now.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead? Take it away. Tell the people, talk to people about it.
When I introduce students to the IC, so do you want to pull up a chart, any of them really quick, Ash, for visual? Because the visual helps you understand so much of what it represents actually, because
Let's
the the birth chart is divided into quadrants by a vertical and horizontal line that intersect these equal quadrants. And the horizontal line that divides it into upper and lower hemispheres literally represents the horizon depending on where you were born. It's how you determine the ascendant or the rising as well as the descendant. It is how we start to determine our inner and our outer worlds.
Mhm.
But just as important, but not as talked about in beginner astrology, just like Ash
Right.
said, is the vertical line, which is our MC at the very top and the IC at the very bottom. And this vertical line intersecting the horizontal is what creates these four equal quadrants. So to give you an understanding of the IC, I actually always start at the MC because it's really easy to understand. The MC is the most visible point on your chart, and this is why it can be the start of your public image and how you're viewed by the greater world at large. It's
You guys know
literally the
that word?
highest point on the
Yeah.
chart.
You know that
Exactly.
word, ma'am? It's the
Hmm.
highest point. Danny said it's the highest point in the chart. It's the most visible point on the chart. And this point is very much associated with your level of visibility. In
Hmm.
layman's terms, what you're famous for,
Yeah.
what you're known for.
Yeah.
So just to kind of give you guys an understanding of where some of this knowledge like comes from. Fill us in.
Exactly. It's easy to remember when you remember, oh, it's that top point on the chart. I'm at the top of the hill, if you will. You know what I mean? I'm on stage. Everybody can see me up here. So
Mm-hmm.
conversely, in opposition to that, literally in opposition to that, 180 degrees away, is therefore the lowest point on the chart. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the IC. I can't remember the Latin term for MC. I know that the IC is
Oh,
imum coeli.
yeah,
The more common phrase for the top point for the MC is midheaven. You'll also hear
yeah,
us use that term. You can use that interchangeably. IC stands for a Latin term, which is why we abbreviate it like that.
right.
Now, if we know what we know about the highest point on the chart, we can start to determine what this lowest point means. And I always tell people this, think of this as your lowest base root of your soul. Like it's the start of so much of where you come from. And it's
Hmm.
not just where you come from, my friend. It's where the people who you came from and who they came from and who they came from. There is lineage and ancestry here. There is generational patterns, traditions, curses, trauma, all of it, from the good to the bad, the ugly. But
Hmm.
everything, it's kind of like a peek in at where the sum of the start of the domino effect might be into who you are and how you came to be. Now, in our one singular life, just this one incarnation, if we're reading this birth chart, we can say that this root of ourselves, this deepest, most private point of ourselves, begins for most of us at birth, in the womb, early childhood, where we first learn home and family, where we first learn relationships. All of this comes together and it starts to build out what that person's fourth house looks like, which is the
Yeah,
house of home and family.
right.
And as is always a prevalent part of the conversation with something like serial killers, where you come from, how you were raised,
Yeah.
and the type of environment you were raised in. So therefore, how you conceptualize that later as an adult is a
Hmm.
huge part of the conversation.
That's exactly why I wanted you to go over IC because I knew that you would explain it in such a palatable way.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And so, with that being said, before I get too far ahead of myself, because I'm already picking out pieces of that I really want to discuss. The first thing I notice here is this Saturn retrograde hanging out right next to his IC. Um, and then Chiron, I think, deserves a space in this conversation as well. And I also want to touch on what you had noticed earlier before we started talking. And guys, this is Jeffrey Dahmer's chart that we are looking at right now. So, Danny, do you have, before you go any further, um, do you have May 21st, 1960?
Hmm.
Okay.
On astro.com, they're using, this is kind of perfect. Ashley and I are using same websites but for different charts.
Yeah.
Um, I've got him at 4:34 p.m. in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Yep, yep,
Mhm.
yep. They've got army time, but yeah, same thing,
Yeah.
4:34. Okay, and
On
I'm
astro.com, this is actually good for anyone who is kind of starting out and pulls this up. I would have to sign in on my account here and turn on Chiron. So just so everybody knows, like right now, Chiron doesn't automatically show up on Jeffrey Dahmer's chart on astro.com. You have to keep little things like that in mind when you're looking up charts. So Ash can see his
Chiron.
Chiron in
Right.
Pisces. Fascinating. And
That's what I
on
said when I
astro.com, it shows no placements in Pisces.
let's okay. And his south node. Okay.
Hmm.
So before we get after this, friends, again, I just want to reiterate neither one of us are saying if you have a Chiron in Pisces that you're meant
No.
to be a serial killer. Okay. So, like, we want to preface this. Um, and I don't know how much any of you all know about Dahmer. Obviously, in this conversation, we'll talk a little bit about the nature versus nurture conversation with Dahmer. For me, this Chiron and Pisces is so fascinating, and I would imagine the same for you, is because Dahmer had this obsession with wanting to hang on to people and love, and he didn't want people to leave. Um, Not to get like too gruesome, I'm still trying to figure out the whole YouTube, what we can say without YouTube getting flagged. So we'll just be aware of that. But
Okay.
essentially, yeah, like we have to stay away from like certain words and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But you know, we'll learn as we go. Dahmer, his thing was offing people and keeping them as like dolls, like his own like toys that would never leave. And the
Hmm.
one thing that he said after his first crime of getting rid of somebody, he said that all he remembered was that he didn't want the hitchhiker to go. So the hitchhiker was like, he hung out with Dahmer for a while. They had so much fun. Before that, he had had fantasies of picking up the hitchhiker. He acted on that fantasy. When the hitchhiker said, "This has been great, I have to go to my next thing," that's when Dahmer attacked. And in his interviews, he literally stated, the only thing I remember was I didn't want him to go."
Hmm.
Um, which I think is so fascinating, exploring this Chiron in Pisces. And if you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
remember, yeah, Chiron is our deepest soul wound. And again, the South Node being there too. What are your thoughts on that, Dani?
So, Chiron and the South Node both definitely play into that for me. The South Node is the opposite of the North Node. The North Node is this point of destiny. It's the dragon head, so it's where we're heading into and where we're going. And the South Node is supposed to be what we're letting go of and shedding. It's the dragon's tail. Um, so that is definitely kind of ringing a bell for me while you're sharing those facts and like how he described the that very first encounter, which one of the most common traits in any serial killer is this almost snowball effect that starts to happen.
Yeah.
And once this has happened a first, second, third time, it almost becomes a growing obsession, if not borderline addiction. You could almost start to classify it as. Pisces is very associated with addiction
Mhm.
and escapism, and that escapism in this case is showing up as delusion
And
in
don't
a
forget, Dahmer's an
sociopathic way.
alcoholic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And
Yeah.
what else also jumped out while you were talking is his his retrograde Neptune in Scorpio. Scorpio is where I looked to also look at some possessiveness when you were talking about
Yeah.
attachment and
In the
difficulty
first
letting
house
go.
too.
And same with Taurus, actually. Taurus can also be very, very possessive as well. And he has Venus in Taurus, which is interesting. And just like Ash said, again, none of these placements mean this is the kind of person that you are, but this is actually a fantastic conversation, astrologically speaking, and in the nature versus nurture. If you have
Right.
those placements and you're a complete 180 opposite of this person, don't you see how it all like it's
It
this
all comes
unique
into play.
combination. Yes, exactly, it's this unique combination of how we're born, what we're born with, and then how we're nurtured after that and what we're taught after that.
Exactly. And all the
And
trauma we go through, there's this thing, Danny and I were
yes.
talking about this beforehand with Dahmer specifically. Neither of us know how much we buy it. But apparently, like in the Jeffrey Dahmer story, what a lot of folks that have studied him thoroughly have said was a huge traumatic event that happened to him. They're not blaming the fact that he became a freaking cannibal because of this, but they're saying it could have had something to do with it. He had a hernia, and when he was like four-ish, they had to remove the hernia. Back in the day, medicine wasn't what it was. It was very traumatic. Apparently, his dad says after the hernia, he became a different boy. This is what his dad is saying. And the only reason why I bring this up is to add to that nature versus nurture
Mhm.
conversation. Let's say you're like, but I have Venus in Cancer. What does that mean? I want you guys to also consider this man had a lot of shit happen to him, did a lot of shit, and obviously wasn't right in the head. And so when you're putting all of this together, it's the makings of somebody who is deplorable. Like you said, it's not one thing we're here just looking at the data.
Yeah,
I hope you-
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That, to me, especially, that is such a great example that you bring up, because what happened to him was, especially if you were hearing that story about someone who didn't do a bunch of horrible things and that happened to them in their childhood, you'd feel
Right.
awful for them. The
Right.
the procedure, from what I understand, the procedure itself was extremely invasive and painful, and then the
Yeah.
recovery process was extremely isolating, and he was
Mhm.
in the hospital without parents for like a ridiculous amount of time, kind of kept in this group room with
Mhm.
other recovering and sick children who are also not being cared for. And so the reason this gets brought up and why Ash brings this up and why so many people bring it up with Dahmer is because he's one of the only guys in this whole list who
Right.
doesn't have this like classic really fucked
Yeah.
up childhood when it comes to his parents.
Like he was
They
getting
weren't like
or something. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. They weren't horribly abusive. There wasn't right. He came from what they say is a pretty well-adjusted, supposedly loving home. And I'm saying supposedly because
You
the
never know what.
truth is we're taking all of this in on just like word of mouth from like his dad and himself and childhood friends, and which
Mm-hmm.
he had very very little of. He started isolating very very early. And
Mm-hmm.
here's where nature versus nurture will never, in my opinion, be able to be proven, is because we'll never be able, from like a scientific point, be able to recreate that to see if
No,
he would have turned out different had that not happened to him.
exactly.
There's no way to know if, and that's where the people that are like, all right, let's not hang up his whole entire, like, all of his later life events on this one early childhood event. I
Right.
agree with most what I would call to be like well-rounded true crime researchers, which is, of course, it probably played a role. Of course,
Yeah.
it probably played a role. But would I say that it is responsible for, or that had it not happened at all, none of this would have ever happened?
Who's
No,
to
I
say?
don't feel confident saying that. Yeah.
No, it's so true. Um, yeah, I want to move on to Gacy because I know we're running
Okay.
out of time here. This happened so quick, but really, really quick. One more point, the nature versus nurture thing. He did come from like what they would call good stock from
Hmm.
what we know, from what
Right.
we know. But he still had a lot of those characteristics of serial killers in the making. Don't forget about all those animals he killed,
Hmm.
right? Like he was, and that is textbook, you're about to be a serial killer.
Hmm.
If you are just randomly stuffing and killing animals at like 8 years old, that was something that is well documented that he did with multiple animals in many different ways. And so then therein lies the question, is that a nature thing? Where did you just come out the womb that way? Because that is a very abnormal thing to do. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. There's arguments on both sides here.
Hmm.
Um, I really want to go to Gacy because if you guys know anything about Gacy, you know he was an arrogant SOB.
Oh my
Very,
God, I hate him so much. I mean, I hate all of them,
but Gacy
but
is the cake, man.
he listening, yeah. Just when I say I hate him, what I mean is almost none of them infuriate me to listen to their interviews as much as John Wayne Gacy does.
Oh my God. So, little bit of background on Gacy, and we can both kind of take this because you know a bit more about him than I do. I looked him up when we decided we would do this, and I listened to Homegirl that you and I were talking about. I
Mhm.
listened to her deep dive on Gacy, and my God, Danny, I was listening to it while I was on the treadmill, and it was making me sick.
Yeah.
Just the bodies. She named every single person that she could with their photo, their age when they were taken. And this is like, we'll link her down in the show notes. I forget her name. What's her name? Do you remember off
I
the top of your
have
head?
it right here. It
Um,
is, do you say this right? Oh, it's Call Me Chris. Duh. I always mess this up.
Holy
It's
crap.
Call Me Chris. Duh. Hi.
She's,
Look at me being silly.
well,
She's amazing. Yeah, link all three.
yeah.
She has videos on all three of them, and she does such great research.
Honestly, it's better than the Netflix. You can even call it a documentary. You should call them dramas.
Yeah.
The Netflix dramas because they're not really documentaries. They're very, very exaggerated. But I listened to hers on Gacy's in preparation for this podcast, and 30 minutes in, I'm like, fuck, bro.
Yeah, dude.
Like,
Yeah.
he had a fascination with men and boys. It's speculated that it had to do with his sexuality and him repressing it. And
Combined with his
yeah,
textbook abuse.
exactly.
Textbook abuse. That's where, again, that's why Dahmer is such a borderline, not outlier, but why a lot of people have a fascination, because a lot of people will go, see, you can also just be born a serial killer. I don't know. It's very fascinating.
No.
Yeah.
Isn't it fascinating? Like, can you
Mhm.
be born a serial killer?
I don't know, like,
And then if you can be born a serial killer, does nurture make even more of a difference so that you don't become that? Because as we said at the top of this, we take the astrology and then we choose what to do with it. So we take
mhm.
what we're born with and we choose what to do with it. And if you are born a serial killer, can you find those markers? Can those markers be found the same way it can be found whether or not you have the marker for sickle cell disease? What are
Right,
we looking for?
right.
It's super fascinating, the conversation.
Hmm.
Okay. So Gacy, do you have, it looks like this military time is throwing me off. What is that? 1:29 a.m., 12:29 a.m.?
Should be 12:29 a.m. Yeah, midnight 29. And March 17th, 42.
Yep, in Chicago. Okay.
Yep.
First thing,
Um,
that.
First of all, so again, since this isn't an episode to like do a deep reading on each of them, the first thing that jumps out is similarity to Dahmer,
Mhm.
which is mutable placements.
Elaborate on mutable placements for the audience.
So just like there are groupings of the signs by element, so we
Hmm.
have the water signs, the fire signs, the earth signs, the air signs, there's another category of groupings called the modalities.
Hmm.
The element refers to kind of the form of energy.
Hmm.
The modality are these characterizations that refer to how these signs move and enact. So it's
Hmm.
much more of an action description.
Hmm.
There are the cardinal signs, which are responsible for initiating change, starting something new, taking the first step, etc. Then you have the fixed signs. They are charged with maintaining, they stabilize, centralize, lay roots down.
Hmm.
And then you have the mutable signs. And the mutable signs are meant to fill in all of those cracks because they are our adapters. They're our resourcefulness. They're how we bend and break with the ebbs and natural flows of life. So mutable signs, the reason that this jumped right out at me, mutable signs, this is a great conversation. It doesn't mean that if you have cardinal energy, you're great at that. There
Right.
are, just like with every single sign, there is a high functioning quality and there's like a shadow functioning quality.
Right.
And
Right.
shadow quality of mutable signs is being very, very manipulative. They're
Hmm.
so good at adapting and being resourceful that in an extreme and an extreme unhealthy expression, we can see massive manipulation or even sociopathic tendencies like this, in my opinion.
Hmm. Yep, I totally agree. So are you looking at his ascendant?
Um, well, yeah, but also we've got Mars and Jupiter in Gemini. So the mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. And right when we opened up the charts for everybody before we hit record, I saw that all three of the men that we chose today have a sun placement in a mutable sign, which is just, again, that doesn't guarantee or mean anything, but isn't it an interesting layer of the
And
conversation?
that's exactly what we're saying, fam. What we are saying is, isn't it interesting?
Hmm.
That's we're posing questions for you to eat.
Yep.
Isn't it interesting?
Yep.
Um, Yeah, and so what Danny's looking at and what I initially saw too was the sun and moon, not only are they conjunct, they're conjunct in Pisces right next to the IC and in the fourth house. Whoa.
Yeah.
That is a placement. I mean, to me, what I'm seeing with this placement is a lot of emotional instability in the home growing up is
Hmm.
kind of really what I'm getting at. And then one can argue, and they're right in this argument. Well, a lot of people have emotional instability in the home growing up. Sure, we're just posing the question. We're just looking at
Hmm.
the data, right?
Hmm.
How does a John Wayne Gacy become the monster that he became and have the audacity to be this member of society? Because, friends, if you don't know about him, he was this like, he was hosting parties at his house.
For hundreds of people,
He gave no fuck.
well-known people.
Like, he was like, and like,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
still gonna do this. And like, the
He
amount.
was charged
Mm-hmm.
and convicted of sexually assaulting a teen boy,
Mm-hmm.
was sentenced to 10 years in prison
Yep.
and was released after 18 months on good behavior. We
Only
are
to be.
talking about a fucking master manipulator,
Mhm.
remorseless human being.
Had
Yes.
a whole wife and kids in the home where he buried bodies underneath their feet,
Hmm.
which I still don't understand how this wife swears up and down she didn't know what was going on. I still think that's weird, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
How do you not know when there's tens, 20, 30? I think they recovered, what was it, 35 bodies and the plot of the house alone?
Yeah. And he claims he would go back and forth, which is why it was so
Yeah.
infuriating
Yeah.
because you want closure for these families. And so
Right.
sometimes he would admit to, I think he at one point admitted to like upwards of over 200 deaths or something like that.
I love
And
me some.
then on the same token, he would turn around and deny the whole thing and said he never said that. And so
Right. Fascinating.
now Ed Gein also
Yes.
has a mutable sun. His sun is in Virgo.
So now we're over at Ed Gein in Virgo in the fourth house,
And
right
you
next.
have him August 22nd, or sorry, 27th,
Mm-hmm.
1906. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was of all that we're looking at, this was the longest ago. This was
Chilling.
one of the, yeah.
This is a very
Oh,
chilling
yeah.
episode, friends. This is a very, I got goosebumps right now. Very
In a
chilling episode.
very quiet, remote little town in Wisconsin. Like,
His
yeah.
demeanor reminds me of Dahmer's in a way. This like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
like in my personal opinion, when we're looking at Dahmer and Geen, I think there really is a question on, were you just born this way? Where when you look at Gacy, to me, when you look at his story, it really gives that he was made this way. Again, not giving any excuse for the horrendous actions that any of these men did. But again, it's worth posing the question. Look at that point right there, that South Node and Chiron right on top of each other
Yeah.
in the ninth house.
Yeah.
What does the Chiron and Aquarius feel like to you? That's one that I don't come across much.
Especially retrograde. Chiron's
Yeah.
retrograde.
Mm-hmm.
So Aquarius is so well known for its progressive qualities.
Right. Right.
People describe Aquarius energy as like they're living in the year 3000 while we're
Yeah.
here in the 2020s, right? This forward, forward, forward. I always tell people, compared to the other fixed signs, because Aquarius is one of those fixed placements, compared to the other fixed signs, the other three fixers are classic. We kind of root down, we
Mm-hmm.
maintain, we stabilize, here we are. Aquarius actually is not really like that.
Thank you.
Aquarius is actually more fixed in its forward motion, in that progress, and always, always, always looking ahead and always moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw Chiron retrograde there, it was kind of like this not just shadow quality of Aquarius, but this like backwards ass quality,
I was thinking the word
shadow
regression.
quality. Yeah,
And from
yeah,
all the studies, the true crime studies done on Ed Gein, it sounds like he was incredibly regressed. And I think it's a mixture of being born this way and his mother keeping
yeah.
him that way. The man, if you look him up, known as a very docile, regressed type human being.
Mm-hmm.
That's who he was. Um, which is fascinating to think about. It really is. Um,
Yeah. And he, you know what jumps out the most at me
mhm.
is he has Pluto in a mutable sign. It's in Gemini, and it is
On his
conjunct
first
to his
house.
ascendant. Yes.
Whew. And that's a tough placement, people. Pluto on the
Yeah.
ascent is a rough one.
It's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah.
Yeah. This can, in a high functioning way, Pluto on the ascendant is representative of tremendous transformation. You're
Yeah.
gonna undergo some fucking life, death, and rebirth yourself. Yourself is
Mm.
with the right again combination of how you're born, those genetics and cards you're dealt that Ed Gein was dealt, combined with the environment he was brought up in, what he was raised with, and again, very likely this extreme regression. It's like having compared to the quote unquote normal human, right? With the normal, when I'm talking about normal, I mean our basic set of morals and ethics that we carry as humans with each other, right? There are these basic fundamental
Mm-hmm.
killing is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
hurting a child is wrong, like, these sexual encounters between non-consenting people is wrong. These are like very basic and very normal. And then
Exactly.
you'll have these people with outliers, and that with that combination of Chiron retrograde in Aquarius right on top of the South Node, and then this Pluto in Gemini right on the ascendant in the first
Don't
house.
forget, our
It's like
dear friend Lilith
backwards
is in the
ass
12th
views.
house.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
dear friend Lilith is in the 12th house in Gemini as well. This is a pretty dark chart. And
Hmm.
for those of you who haven't looked up at Gein, just really quick, his thing was he wanted to be in his mother's skin, to put it to you guys directly. I know that sounds absolutely crazy. That's just the most direct way I can put it.
Hmm.
He offed people. He offed people to take their skin, and he wanted to be in his mother's skin on a very deep level. Um,
There's definitely, as you're talking, Ash, as we're talking about this, and we're not only looking at the astrology, but we're sharing bits and pieces
mhm,
about how they were born and how they were raised. One common thread seems to
mhm.
be that there is this distorted and messed up way of expressing trauma and desire.
Yes, nail on the head. And that, friends, is really what we're getting at. I think that is really what we're getting at. It's this distorted and messed up way of expressing trauma and desire. Say it louder for the people in the back. And I think the big question that we're really posing here is how much does astrology really have to do with it? We don't know. How much
No.
does nature really have to do with it? We don't know. How much does nurture really have to do with it? We don't know. What we can do as astrologers is take a look at that chart and just kind of put some pieces together that we find to be fascinating. Danny and I together have probably looked at thousands of charts at this point, if you
Mhm.
especially if you put us together. And there are some placements that we saw today that I'm not sure I've seen before, especially Ed Gein's last one.
Yeah.
The South Node
Fascinating.
and
Yeah.
Chiron both retrograde in Aquarius. I don't know that I've ever seen that one.
I know.
And
It's very, very interesting. This is, Just because we're not saying, oh, if this happens to you, you will turn out this way.
Right.
At the same time, there's a reason why there's more research on how to parent, how to
Yeah.
treat a child, how
Yeah.
to address and respond to trauma.
Yeah.
Research has added up over the years that shows us these are how you offer the right tools at the right time, because those formidable years, so they say 0 to 7 is, in fact, they stress moms out with this. They tell you this when you're a mom, when you're a new mom. You have to do all of your most important teaching and bonding with your kid from ages 0 to 7, because the fundamental parts of their brain are formed by that age. And if my kid is 7 right now, and that has, I can't tell you how many times it's ran through my head as soon as she hit her 7th birthday. I was like, well, hope we did enough. Hope we did enough. Hope we did it right. But the truth is it's not about like showing her, it's not about preventing bad things from happening to her. It's about, again, presenting the right tools, but more than anything, how I model my behavior and how
Yeah.
society around her models behavior are two of the biggest fucking impacts on how she will respond to and make decisions later on as an adult. So when Ash and I look at some of these charts, especially Ed Gein, because it's 2025, Ash and I don't get that many charts for people born in the early 1900s. Once in a while,
Sure.
we'll look up historical figures, but
Yeah.
overall, we're not, we don't, that's,
Not
and
going
there's
that far back
nothing
in
wrong with
time.
it. I'm just saying that we don't, we're not
No
getting
shit.
bookings from,
Wow.
yes. So there's generational planets on here that you, in placements, you and I are not used to
Hmm.
seeing, and those represent not just these individual people, but society at that time as well, and how society was responding to these things as well, which again, just another layer to the conversation is all I'm
Another
saying.
layer. It's so true. So, I hope you all enjoyed that. Just in time for spooky season. Nice little All Hallows Eve Halloween episode. You know where to find us. All of our links will be down below. And remember, like, share the episode. Let us know what you thought. You can comment now on the Spotify platform. So send us a comment and we'll comment back. And we'll see you in the next one. Have a very safe Halloween. Ciao, ciao. Hello, friends. I hope you loved today's episode. Make sure you share it with a friend, share it with somebody that you love, and tag me on the gram at Ashley Michelle 90 Day and let me know your thoughts. Leaving that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify is literally what helps this work get to the right people. As you may or may not know, we are in the middle of a spiritual revolution, and us being able to get our hands on resources like this podcast and others is what is literally going to make the world go round. So do me this favor and please leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and share the episode with somebody you love. It really, truly does mean the world to me. I love you so very much, and I will see you in the next one.